Rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Kelly.
Ms. Betterbit? Here. Mr. Case-Layout?
Here.
Ms. Lynn? Here. Mr. Akowski?
Here.
Ms. Stadler?
Here.
Mr. Singh?
Here.
Mr. Wolf?
Present.
Ms. Hewer? Here. Mr. White?
Here. Fire exit map.
Exits are in the back of the LGM.
All right, and on the agenda, I know it says it's a proposed executive session. However, I would like to push that after the workshop, so I'm making a motion to move the executive session 2.01 to after the workshop.
So moved.
Second.
Anthony and then Kristen.
No, Mike. Put Mike on.
Mike. I seconded it. Comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 9-0. Next one. All right. Would everybody please rise for a moment of silence for Ms. Sabatini, who worked for the Beacon City School District for 30 years as a principal secretary or office secretary at Randolph Middle School, as well as for the victims of 9/11. Thank you. All right, tonight's workshop is a discussion about strategic planning. I'm going to let Dr. Landau introduce our guest speaker.
Sure. Tonight we have Jonathan Costa here, and he is going to provide an overview of strategic coherence planning that he has done for a number of districts in the area. This summer I was introduced to Jonathan's work at a workshop I was at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. One of the really cool things about the workshop was there's a number of teachers and administrators from other districts, and when we were discussing some of the things we were working on as a district, probably about 3 or 4 different teachers said, you have to talk to Jonathan, you have to meet Jonathan, you have to find out about Jonathan because he helped our district with the same exact thing. So I spoke with the administrators at PNW BOCES and got connected with Jonathan. I also did exploring of other folks who do this work, other companies, etc., and Jonathan seemed like a really great fit. So I thought it'd be a great way to kind of kick things off for him to talk about his work with the board a little bit. And so he has some slides he's going to go through, and then you can have questions at any time.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Can I advance it from over there? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you can. There's a mic there, and you can just do it from there. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Good evening.
So I told Matt I'm a 6-year Board of Ed survivor. I stand before you after 6 years of service to my local Board of Education. I understand what you go through, so I'm going to make this direct and to the point. And I think it's a metaphor for the planning process itself.
You can take your time. Sometimes we wait until midnight.
Okay. So it's called strategic coherence planning because it differs from strategic planning that you may be aware of. I did traditional strategic planning for about 25 years, and in the end, did not feel that the processes I was trained in got my clients to the places they needed to be, which I feel strongly were focusing on the most critical skills and attributes students needed for success beyond school. And I felt like no matter what I did to try to nudge them, I couldn't get them there. So I finally just designed my own process, which is totally backwards designed. So we start with what are the most critical skills and attributes you want for your students before they graduate, and we look at all of your instructional assessment and support systems to see how aligned they are with those things. And that's it. So we know the outcomes before we start. Everybody is on the same page with what we're trying to get to before we start, and we backwards design from there. So that is how it's different, and it is all about that goal. I'm assuming you all serve on this board and your staff work for you every day so that every student leaves Beacon ready to make a choice about what they want to do in their lives beyond school. And so we start with thinking about what are those most critical skills and attributes that students are going to need in order to be able to make that choice. And if you look at that picture, that's a classroom in Connecticut from about 100 years ago. And my overriding theme here is that the skills and attributes that they needed for success in that classroom are different from the skills and attributes your kids are going to need today, not only in your classrooms but beyond. And so we start the process by having the committee that we're going to work with answer that question. What are the most important preparatory skills and attributes that students need for future success? We'll call it the profile of the graduate, however you want to label it. That is where we start, and everything goes back from there. So that is the answer to the what we want question. We think about how we need to teach, how we need to measure, how we need to align support systems, and that is then applied to what you're already doing in the district. And we just look at the gap between the first and the second, and that's the work you need to do. And that's really all that this is. And all of the process, all of the work, all of the accountability at the end are just about moving the district closer to the answer to that first question. I think a lot about this relationship, and the entire planning process is built on this. So if you think about your answer to the profile of the graduate question, that they become the driving goals and the mission and leadership focus of the district. We then look at teaching and learning practices and measurement and feedback practices to see how well they are aligned with those things and how well systemically they are connected throughout the district. I love the metaphor of the gears. I use it all the time because in order to move a district in any direction takes energy, takes inertia. These are the main gears of the engine of learning in your district. And if they aren't turning together, turning in the same direction for the same reason, you're not going to get anywhere or make any difference. And I'm going to add a couple of gears to that in a minute. But we think about the instructional shifts required to build the skills that we know kids need in this day and age. And I always use this example with my planning groups about, I'm a retired and recovering history teacher, and I gave that lesson on the left more times than I really want to admit. And the lesson on the right is the exact same content, just framed in the context of critical and creative thinking, making an argument based on evidence, information literacy, communication, collaboration, all of those skills that you're going to end up thinking about as we go through this process. So, and also, more importantly, how do we give kids feedback on how well they are developing the skills that you want them to have? Are our measurement and accountability systems aligned with that feedback? How do we give adults, teachers, administrators feedback on their ability to help support those things? And how are all those systems connected? This is not a choice between tests and local assessments. It's about focusing on that middle ground, which helps success in both areas, and focusing relentlessly on those things that matter most as we go through the process. So instructional core systems are the most important. We spend the most time on them, but there are supporting systems to them in the district as well. How well the community is engaged in supporting your plan, your process, your outcomes, how the board's policies and regulation, how you act as a group to support those same things. and how you deploy resources in the district to support those things. So those are the instructional systems core and the supporting systems core, and all of the gap assessments that we'll do around your alignment with the goals that you set for your kids' learning will be determined by, through the lens of those systems. The other thing we look at is this is not just one-dimensional. So we set goals for student learning, we have evidence of student success and instructional practices to help lead it at the student level, but we also set goals for adults every year, and I'm assuming you set goals for the district and in buildings every year. How are those goals, measures, and practices at the professional and district level directly tied to your profile of the graduate and what you want kids to do? In my experience, any lack of alignment among the three domains, goals, measures, and practices, dissipates improvement energy, and it also dissipates if adult goals are not tied to those student goals and if district goals are not tied to those same things. So we're looking at alignment between systems, alignment across the organization, and essentially tying all of the major drivers of change to that profile of the graduate and what are the things that matter most for kids over time. This is sort of how you get there, and it is a process where we sort of go from the vision of a graduate and committing to those principles of coherence, goals, measures, and practices aligned across the organization with the supporting systems. We do the data scan, 5 different systems analysis teams made up of people from the planning team plus other members of the community, looking at the gaps, if there are any, between what you're currently doing and what we think we need to do. Coming back together, sharing what those gaps are, prioritizing them in that results analysis retreat, and then taking those priorities and planning for how to change practice over time to close the gap that we found. There are several opportunities to involve the broader community, especially in the beginning where we're talking about building a vision of a graduate, using electronic tools like thought exchange, focus groups to bring people together to make sure that whatever the committee sets as the critical skills and attributes in the profile of the graduate are representative of the broader Beacon community. And we can also use more than the planning committee in the data scan process, where we'll draw volunteers in to help with that system analysis as well. It's an open and transparent process. We host it all through Google Docs, and every member of the planning committee has access to all the materials throughout the entire process. Those are the 4 outcomes of coherence. That is what we are backwards mapping from. So you will have identified, defined, and committed to supporting that descriptive vision of the successful graduate and its associated goals for learning. You commit to ensuring that all student and adult learners consistently engage in experiences that are rigorously, timely, and appropriately aligned with that vision of success. And you use and report on appropriate balanced measures of student and adult success that are aligned with that vision, and that you also align your supporting organizational systems to support the acquisition of those student learning goals. That is the purpose of the planning process right there. And if any one of those 4 things creates anxiety, this isn't really a great process for you, because it's going to just be relentlessly driven toward those 4 things. We do use Thought Exchange as our community engagement tool. It's really simple, it's very straightforward, and it's open-ended and gives the community a chance to respond to whatever critical questions the planning committee has. That usually is in the area of the profile of the graduate and later the alignment of the systems, so we get at least 2 opportunities to bring the broader community through that. And in the end, the planning process is designed to increase Beacon's ability to ensure that every student in your care leaves with those skills and attributes you believe they need to be successful. That's why we're here. So that's the 10,000-foot, 5-minute view. What are you thinking now?
Yeah, it's a question. So, we also looked at the Hyde Park plan.
Yeah.
That you sent over.
Yep.
And it looks like they just started, met in 2017 or 15, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So, how long is that plan expected to full implementation? Is it a 5-year plan? Is it?
It was really originally designed as a 5-year plan.
Okay.
And I never do action plans more than a year out because life is uncertain. And we identify the priority gaps, sequence them out for the first year, lay out what we think the work will be after that, and commit the planning committee to come back and revise and rethink where they are in terms of the work that needs to be done based on the progress made on an annual basis. If you look at the Hyde Park plan, there are 2 ways that boards can use the plan to hold the administration accountable for their work. So in the gap analysis process, each of those systems are analyzed through 4 to 6 critical attributes that are scored on a Likert scale. And the board will get sort of a heat map of where the district's progress is along that continuum for each of those attributes in each of those 5 areas. So that's one measure. You can go back and re-examine where you are and see if you've made progress. In each of the strategic gap closing strategies that is in the plan, there's also a mechanism called a innovation configuration map where we lay out for everyone what progress in that gap closing strategy would look like. So we collect a lot of current state data as part of the planning process, and we have the vision of where we need to be. So we describe what progress would look like along that continuum. And it's really important because sometimes the gap between where we are and where we want to be is a large one, and it's hard for people to imagine what the jump would look like from where we are to all the way to where we need to be. What strategy can possibly jump us all the way through that in one step? So we break it down into smaller steps, and so the work we need to do is not to get all the way from A to Z, but it's maybe just to get from A to D first. And once we get there, we can plan on how to get from D to R, or just to break it down into smaller steps. So looking back on a finished plan, a board will be able to think about the progress along the heat map continuum, and also progress along the gap closing strategies, all the while knowing that those 4 outcomes that I mentioned earlier are the foundation of the process from the beginning.
And how's Hyde Park doing with the plan? You think the first year was a good year for them following this plan? Or?
We were totally engaged in supporting their plan the first year out because one of their critical gaps was the ability to assess the critical thinking skills that they valued most. They had tons of assessment data in the district. Very little of it was aligned with how they define critical thinking. So we worked with them to help build capacity to collect evidence and give kids feedback that was consistent across the district on what good critical thinking looked like. And they've sort of picked it up from there. All I can tell you is from our annual meetings, they still use the plan, they are still focused on the plan, and I believe if the superintendent were here, she'd tell you that it has provided a real roadmap for them to come together around a collective vision of student success, and that they were happy with it. There are about 5 districts in your region that have been through this process over the last 10 years, and I did give Matt the name of each of those superintendents. They're all pretty satisfied with the work, I think.
This might be a silly question. I'm wondering how discrete what the picture looks like from district to district. I can't imagine that, anyone saying
I understand your question.
Do you? Okay.
I do. The answer to the question about the profile of the graduate
is very consistent.
Okay.
And that's true because there's quite a bit of unanimity on what that critical skill set looks like. I mean, we've been studying it in both academic and non-academic circles for 30 years. And the data would show that I could probably tell you what the top 4 or 5 are going to be, but each community defines it and decides it for itself. So there's a lot of alignment on what the things are. Every district is in a different place as to how well aligned their systems are with those 4 things. So, I just finished a plan nearby where the district was doing a lot of stuff instructionally, but it wasn't consistent or aligned from classroom to classroom, from building to building, and they had some fairly large deficits on assessment alignment as well. I've been in other districts where there's virtually nothing to little going on that is consistent in either of those 2 domains. The good news is, whatever you are currently doing that is aligned with the goals that you say are the most important will be celebrated and built on. So, I mean, it's stuff that's going on in the district, and I'm sure there is lots of stuff already going on, just gets built on. And all we're seeking is consistency and predictability. So it's less a matter of which teacher you get, whether you get these skills and that good feedback, rather than every kid's going to get it no matter where they are over time. So there's no place to hide from those critical skills and attributes and feedback on how well you're doing.
Just as a follow-up to that, from the viewpoint of a board member, and that, one of our primary responsibilities is to always keep thinking about budget.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with the need for this process, and it's something that we've been missing, but how big of a lever is resources
Sure.
when it comes to applying them to this? And
so I say the
success
same thing.
outcomes?
I say the same thing to every board. This whole process is trying to focus you on the things that matter most. So by definition, there are other things that you are currently doing that don't matter as much. You should be able to do everything that's in here without 1 penny of additional money. But you'll have to do something less, or you'll have to stop doing something to do this. If you have the resources to write a really big check and do it all on top of it, that's great. But nobody has that. So this is a reflection. This is basically a process that's going to ask you to look in the mirror and say, okay, so if having kids that are great critical thinkers is the most important thing you're going to do, how well do all of your current programs support that? And if they don't, how can they be re-engineered so they do? Or is there something else you can do that'll do it more effectively? And life on a board is all about making difficult choices about resource allocation. And how will your debate get focused when it comes time to allocate those resources? If you go to North Salem, who is the most experienced in this, I did this plan with them 11 years ago. Every single budget presentation for the past decade has started with their mission focus, which is helping kids be better problem solvers. So if you've got 10 things to choose from, and the first 5 things are directly aligned with helping kids be better problem solvers, they are going to be first in line for resources because they are mission aligned. So we're trying to build a framework for you to have a consistent and common set of values and priorities when you get into the trenches and start talking about resources that are scarce. Yep.
Are you familiar with the Ithaca Equity Report Card? Because of some of the material I saw through Hyde Park, it looks a little bit familiar with that.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Every district has their own local context, and of the 5 data collection groups, the 5th one is about local context. So things that are important to a district locally that are not shared with all of the other districts that have been through the plan are sort of gathered and determined by that group. So if there's a specific concern that you have locally that has an impact on the plan or would have an impact on the implementation of the plan, that's where that would be discussed and framed by the group.
Okay, and to follow up on that, I was looking at the report cards for both Hyde Park and comparing it to ours, and
Mm-hmm.
it seems like they've got about maybe 700 kids more than we do, so they're about similar size. The diversity, though, of their students is less than ours. So when I was looking at the key gaps in focus that they have equity for technology, textbook, field trips, and professional development for buildings by percentage of students in each building. I was wondering if you could just elaborate what equity are they speaking about?
So when I got to Hyde Park, they had I think one school that was on sort of the New York State naughty list. They had some districting issues related to the distribution of students on freedom reduced in their community. There was a community perception around unequal resources in schools, specifically related to technology, but it washed over into other instructional areas. And so when you do the systems analysis around the capacity of the district to meet the needs of every kid to acquire those goals, those learning outcomes, in a classroom environment that is rigorous and challenging, you get the data that you get. And there was some recognition of equity issues related to resources across the district, and I believe that is what you see there. The challenge to the district is to create an instructional environment where every child has the same opportunity, challenge, and resources to meet and acquire the goals that the district wants for every child. That's the standard. If data should show that the system is weak in doing that in any one area, it is going to bubble up as part of the process.
I got one more, but I'll let somebody else get a chance.
Did you have a question, Mike?
Yes, so how long could it take to go from identification of the goals, doing the assessments, identifying some of the gaps, to get all that together, to start laying out your plans? Could we make the next budget cycle even to, are these things
When do
that can be
once
done?
you start coming together? When do you start budgets?
Probably
January.
January.
Yeah, you'll know what your gaps are before January 1st, and you'll have a sense of some of the priorities before budget season starts, for sure.
You could work on some things. We're looking for some quick wins,
Sure.
get going on some of the changes.
Absolutely. It's 12 to 16 weeks to have a pretty clear idea. You're not going to have it all laid out, but you'll have a sense of priority here in this room as soon as that retreat is scheduled, which right now is, I think, in the draft plan is sometime in early December. So you'll have it in time.
All right, thank you.
And that's an important benchmark, because when Matt and I get together and frame out some dates, we can try to sync it so we meet that expectation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question. I was curious about your methods of assessment. If you have a general approach, or if it's more nuanced depending on the district, kind of what those might be.
Assessment of what?
Well, that's a great question. So organizational assessment obviously would be very different than student assessment or teacher assessment.
So they're actually remarkably similar.
Okay.
I am a great believer in shared expectations and then positive feedback for growth. So assessment and accountability, if it's framed for students, adults, or organizations as do this or else, you're going to get a certain set of outcomes based on, resentment and protecting your own rear end. If we're trying to work together in the best interest of kids to reach a common goal. And we have shared expectations for how well we want students to be able to do, and how well we want adults to be able to do to help them get there, and what we expect of our school system to get there. And we agree on what good evidence of progress looks like at each of those levels, and we can be transparent about what we're collecting. We can work together on how to build strategies to make that evidence more consistently appear, and to help everybody perform better at their task. The key is to align the tasks with the goal. So multiple evidence points, multiple avenues of data collection, thoughtful, reflective practice, collective intervention, sustained effort. It's the same for kids as it is for adults, as it is for organizations, in my opinion.
That sounded compelling.
Okay.
I'm still a little unclear though. Just would that be
So you
testing, interviews? Is this?
Oh, you mean, so in the data collection phase of the
Yeah,
plan?
what kind of data would we look at?
So whatever's available. And sometimes in some districts, the lack of data is the data. So if I were to say, so give me your sense of how well the most recent graduating class of Beacon was performing critical thinking as it relates to problem solving. And the answer is, we don't have any. That's a data point. If we have rubrics that are being used in different classes at different points, but they're not consistent or they're not, that's a different data point. If you look at 10 years of region scores, or 10 years of math data, or 10 years of any kind of data, that tells another part of the story. So whatever data is available that is aligned with the question will be part of the discussion.
Have you had any in past, just to follow up on that,
Mhm.
in past districts, do you have any variation in terms of access to that data, in terms of working with faculty? I'm sure some districts have some faculty that's more comfortable with collaboration than others.
Sure. And I think the way I described what we're looking for a couple minutes ago is really important on setting the tone for that. So, one of my roles outside of this process is I chair international school accreditation trips. And there's the protocol that the New England Association uses called the ACE protocol. And it's a continuum. And we don't care where your district is. We just want to know where it is. Because when we know where it is, we can help you get to the next step. This is not, you either meet the standard or you don't. You're a failing school or you're not. Where is your school? Be honest about where it is. Because if you're honest with us about where it is, we can be honest with you about how to make it better. My biggest challenge in the present state data collection is convincing people that it's okay to be honest about where you are. Because you're setting a framework and a baseline for how you get better. For things you're doing well, we need to celebrate it and highlight it. But the things that you think don't meet these frameworks, we just need to share it so we can figure out how, working together, we can get better. So I try to set that tone from the beginning with adults, with students, with administrators. We're not doing this to catch anybody.
Right.
We're doing this to try to come together on what we want every kid to be able to do, and work together as adults to help as many kids do it as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
What was your experience in other districts with regards to buy-in from the community at large? Did you have challenges, since people are often resistant to change? Was it a hard-fought battle, or was it relatively easy?
Well, if I leave a district in a battle, I've failed. Okay. Change is a process, not an event. And I've had districts where the first year of planning, the first year of work, is making sure everybody understands why we're doing the work. Because if they're not with you, you got nothing. And one of my favorite quotes is, "Being right is not a strategy." I can tell you what the 4 most important skills are probably going to be, but those are my answers. They're not your answers. You know, if I walked around your schools for a week, I could write a report on where you are vis-a-vis the standards. It's not. It doesn't help if I do it. You have to do it. So every community is different in that regard. Typically, the hardest part comes when you have to start making choices over start, stop, continue, right? And so it's really important to get a broad buy-in around what those critical skills are, because if the community has helped you decide it, then you can have a rationale for why we're doing one thing over another. But that typically is where the challenges really begin. We have finite resources. We have to make a difficult decision. We're doing it based on our best judgment given where we believe the district needs to go. And that really is this body's most important job. How do you shepherd those resources and focus them to get the greatest results that you can for the greatest number of kids? And what this kind of plan tries to do is make those things so readily apparent that it's harder to chip away at the edges of them, because it's going to go right down the middle of Main Street, essentially.
Right.
And I spoke to Matt earlier around, you know, if folks come to the committee with a specific thing that they want to advocate for, you know, I noticed on your webpage and the pride that you have at the Beacon Players. You know, I was on stage most of my life. It's wonderful. If you're coming to increase the budget for the Beacon Players, this is going to be a really frustrating process for you, because we can talk about how the Beacon Players help these other skills, but that's the lens we're going to be looking through, just that lens. This is the one chance you have to talk about the things that you all think are important. There are all kinds of mechanisms to advocate for the things that individuals think are important or small groups think are important. This is designed around the thing that should matter for everybody.
So in that planning process, what kind of forums are there for the greater community to weigh in or to bring their ideas?
Primarily it's through thought exchange, through that. I mean, you can add face-to-face forums and focus groups. That just comes down to resources. Thought exchange allows you to reach the most people the least expensively, but the board can make a decision that we want to have community forums around this and do it in person. That's totally your decision.
Thank you.
Yep.
You speak of a committee. What do you recommend for personnel on the committee?
Matt and I talked about that a little bit. You know, 18 to 22 folks, 60-40 representation, professional staff to community, teachers, administrators make up the primary 60% staff representation. You know, a teacher from every building, an administrator from each level, central office representation, and on the community side, members of the board, members of the public, parents, and perhaps local municipal elected officials as well. We can work productively with anyone who has an open mind and is committed to serving the town, essentially. That's the only qualification, really.
Who does the drafting? Me.
So we've talked about student successes before on at this board and level, and that's why we're glad to see computer science introduced into the curriculum. That's why we've been asking about other topics, including industrial arts, which we don't have here, And we've looked at, I've looked at the New York State Department of Labor Statistics as to, what are the jobs that are in need and projected to be in need. And then, we've also had discussion about BOCES, about how far it is and how students have to pick between the BOCES class and
Sure.
classes here. So when you mention about student success, future student success, where is your goalpost? Is it so that, not just succeeding in high school, but succeeding in college or trade and succeeding 5 years from there?
Right. So, my personal frame of reference is what are the skills and attributes a child needs to be empowered to make choices about their own future once they're finished with you. So I graduate from Beacon, and I can go to a highly competitive four-year university. I could go to community college. I could get a job with a trade. I could do essentially what I want to do when I leave. So I am much more concerned with how things are taught across the entire curriculum than I am what specific courses you teach in the curriculum. Because I have encouraged my staff when they talk to students to ask the question, what are you going to do first? Not, what are you going to do? Because the old question about what are you going to do when you leave high school, in this day and age, there is never, ever going to be just one answer. That is going to be the anomaly. Most of your kids, when they leave you, are going to do several different things. How they're prepared to do it depends on the first decision they make when they leave here, but it is my goal that they have the curiosity, the thinking skills, the adaptability, the persistence, the critical thinking ability, the information literacy they need to make really good choices no matter what pathway they go down. So I'm personally more concerned with how everything is taught than I am specifically with what is taught in any specific program.
All right. Thank you very much, John. I do
Sure.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of particular individuals and to review collective bargaining with the Lincoln Association of Office Personnel.
So moved.
Anthony?
Second.
Meredith? And the board is expected to return in a half hour. Comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 9-0. All right, in reviewing the agenda, we do have some corrections and or additions. Item 11.03C5, non-instructional, we removed a person. We do have, and it was on the printed, it's on board docs, we have addendum item resolution 091118A. We're also going to add an addendum item 12.02, which is a contract between Sean Bradwell to do a board retreat, and that will be resolution 091118B. Did anybody have anything else that I may have missed? All right. All right, are there any student or school presentations? Are there any parent groups? So we will open it up to the public. We had one person sign up. Dennis?
Dennis Pavlock, Beacon resident. I've been coming here on and off. I guess like a bad penny, I guess, keep coming back every so often, I guess. Let me just read something. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but let me just read this off to you. And I guess it requires, my comments require no reply, just what do we got to do with the information, whatever, so. In May of 2017, the Austin Union Free School District made a horrific discovery when an anonymous tip called in to inform the school officials that one of his custodians had been arrested for raping a child in a neighboring Dutchess County school. Because of the loophole in the law, that's how New York State and states do laws with loopholes, no one was ever required to officially notify the district of a serious offense, and the custodian remained employed by the district over a year while out on bail. While many New Yorkers assume that extensive background checks would keep potentially dangerous individuals from gaining employment with the school district, current state law states the law does not require schools to be provided with arrest notifications of employees hired before 2001. Because of the custodian was hired before the year, the Austin School District was left in the dark. The bill closes a dangerous loophole. I guess they amended it. That's just one of my many comments I have. I should say many, but one. Like I said, I've been at the board several times, several years in the past. And I noticed that a lot of times, sometimes students come to the Board of Education meetings to petition the board for new courses at school. And courses that they might need in the future for college or whatever the case may be, courses. And then I detect an attitude by, I guess, all Board of Educations, not just this one. And I don't mean it's I've been saying it for years. When the budget comes up for review, a passing of a budget, then it's like, well, now we're going to take what's your petition for the board and what some of the board members put out there to get new curriculum for you so you can be productive students. I think it puts us in a rock and a hard place, especially if students have suffer from panic attacks and the parents here thinking that their students are going to get, what they're coming to school for to get. And it's not every year because, I guess it's once in a while that we have that happen when the budget's in jeopardy. And I don't believe we should be doing that any longer. We need to stop. If we're going to be with the students to see them be successful when the budget passes,
20 seconds, Dennis.
yeah, then we need to be with them when the budget doesn't pass and support them that way too. Not just get you halfway and then the bridge cuts off and falls out in front of you. Thank you.
That's time. Thank you, Dennis.
Yep.
Anybody else would like to address the board? Seeing none, we're going to go to the superintendent's report.
Okay, we have a two-part report tonight and just have a few updates here, and then Celia is going to do just a brief overview of the new ESSA, the New York State plan for the Every Student Succeeds Act, just so the board knows what's going on with that. All right, we started school last week. We had a very smooth start. It was hot. I lost about 10 pounds walking around all the classrooms those 2 days, and teachers and students had it much worse than me because they were in those classrooms all day. So it was hot. I heard a lot about the heat, and we did do a few things over the summer to try to address the heat. We installed something called solar shades on all the second floor classrooms that are facing that way at Sargent, and all the second floor classrooms at South Avenue, and some other rooms got them as well, right?
Yes.
At the elementary level. That they had a hard time being effective because it just was so intensely humid as well. But despite all that, what really blew me away was the engagement level of the students, teachers and staff just working really hard to ensure just a really welcoming and smooth start to the school year. I am just overjoyed that we are back at it again and getting on the buildings every day. We have a few things I just want to highlight here. One of the appointments we have at the teacher level tonight is for another instrumental music teacher. This is the grant that we were awarded a few months ago from the state. This is part of the grant, and so this grant will pay for a year's salary and benefits for a person to start teaching 4th grade instrumental music. We have typically always started in 5th grade here in Beacon, and so we found a great person. And he's already kind of been starting, but he's going to officially start tomorrow, and hopefully towards the end of October we'll be starting the 4th grade. He's going to be working with 5th graders for the next month, and then we'll start implementing the 4th grade instrumental music. A lot of districts start in 4th grade, and so we are excited to be able to match them. The grant also pays for instruments to get that program up and running. Next Monday, we have teacher leaders across all 6 of our schools meeting with school administrators and an outside consultant, Sean Bradwell. These teachers receiving a stipend this year to be equity leaders for their schools, and so the goal of this program is for schools to develop plans to make their schools more welcoming, more inclusive, more responsive, more culturally responsive, more responsive to the diversity in our community. And it won't happen overnight, but we're really excited for them to get the training, and also part of the training will be for them to start developing these school plans. We originally were going to have this before the school year started, but an issue came up with the schedule of our consultant. We had to postpone till Monday of next week, but we were really excited to get that going as well. On Friday, I notified the entire community about some air quality issues that were at both Beacon High School and Forrestal, just to refresh people's memory. The areas that we identified and looked at the high school were our art classrooms, and our 3 music rooms. And the area at Forrestal that we identified were on the bottom floor, rooms 6 through 12. And so what we found in those rooms were some small amounts of mold starting to develop. Kind of different reasons for both schools, but primarily driven by this intense humidity that the area has been undergoing for the entire summer, really. And so we decided to act on it quickly. We brought in an outside company, ServPro, and they cleaned extensively those rooms at the high school and the rooms at Forrestal over the weekend. We had the air quality tested by an environmental company, and I just got text of the results that those are all satisfactory. We were assuming they would be because this company does a really great job, and so I'll be able to email this out to the community tomorrow. I've been in all of these rooms extensively over the last week, and we were really happy to be able to take care of it as quickly as we did. And so the official communication will go out tomorrow, but I just want to say thanks for everyone to their understanding for that issue, and thanks to staff who were helping make all this happen all weekend long by being there to supervise and make sure these folks had access to the rooms. All right, and I have, what's that? Oh, yeah. We have something really special today. We have some board achievement awards to give out. These 2 board members have done a lot of training, and they have these really nice certificates from NISBA. So Craig Wolf You get the Board Achievement Award for getting 75 leadership development training points in the past year. And Anthony White for 150 points. I'm sure these will go up somewhere special in your house.
I'd like it displayed at the board office.
Oh, okay. I'll put them we'll put a facsimile on my wall. So that is the end of my part, and if you all have questions during your comments about anything I said, I'm happy to answer. But Celia has a brief presentation about ESSA that we wanted to get done during this time.
Thank you, and good evening. So I'd like to just start, let me offer the perspective. This is the broad frame of the very complex system of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the federal laws and regulations governing elementary and secondary education across the country, and New York State's response to that. Just for everyone's perspective, know that, and it's affectionately known already as ESSA, but Every Student Succeeds Act is really the scope of the external measures, more specifically the outcomes that New York State has defined in response to the federal laws and regulations that will give a sense for school districts across New York State of how well our internal actions are helping our students to succeed. Every state had to submit those plans over the course of last school year, and they will have to be approved by the federal government. In terms of the New York State plan, as many of you may know, and if you don't, this is just a quick scope of the process that State Ed went through. And so they're required we're required through the Department of Education to respond as a state and then as a local entity to the legislation that they set forth in terms of the guidance for school systems. New York State went through a process of engaging stakeholders at many different levels over the course of a year, almost a year and a half, submitted to the federal government, responded back to feedback, advocated in certain areas of where there's flexibility allowed, and our state's plan was approved in January of 2018. This year, the 18-19 school year, is the official start for districts in terms of responsibility to align and respond to this new accountability system. Know that the data that will be used for this setting forth this year and every year subsequently is based on the 2016-2017 data. Again, also in quick highlight, this is very similar. Know that this is the reauthorization of formerly the No Child Left Behind Act. There are some terminology that's new in terms of what specific measures and how they'll measure, and I'll go into a few of those that are most critical to inform our thinking, as well as then what the responses are in terms of interventions. But know that for the New York State plan, they were built upon the existing accountability system, but used it as a lever to focus more on what the outcomes are for students across New York State beyond just test scores. So here's a quick glance of what's new in the Every Student Succeeds Act. So there's components of ESSA that speak to accountability, the ways in which schools are identified as needing support and or interventions. I'm going to show you some examples in a few minutes of the broader measures that are looking at student success, or how we're going to define student success in New York State. In terms of school improvement, a major change is that the interventions are not going to be determined at the state or federal level for districts that need to focus on improvement, but there's more control being given at a local level to define what's important and what's necessary within a school system and within schools, particularly under the leadership of their district office, to guide those improvement actions. And so the next level of this work is around school focus planning with district leadership support. Also, as in previous education acts, there's a focus on educator development. The new part of it is allowing districts to have more flexibility in terms of how they allocate and use resources of funding for teacher and principal training. You may, as board members, be aware there's discussion in terms of how school level expenditure reporting will be shared out with a focus for all of us to be looking at educator equity and the effectiveness of how we're using our resources, both our human capital resources as well as our fiscal resources to support student needs. In terms of student supports, ESSA places a stronger focus on the outcomes of our English language learners and to take into account what the second language acquisition process is for those students that are learning and acquiring English. There's additional reporting factors for data collection that are not tied to accountability results and outcomes, but it will be used for long-term planning and analysis, and defined as other at-risk student groups that have impact on the overall outcomes that we're looking for our students to achieve. Specifically, all districts will be reporting out in some slightly new ways of how we're providing and who our students are that may be experiencing homelessness at various points in time through the academic year. Those students that are connected, what's called military connectedness, but come from military families, whether those are families that are experiencing deployment or just are connected to military service, as well as those students that may be in foster care systems. So those are some of the broad strokes of what's new. This chart I share with you, and the PowerPoint will be on our website as well, but just a comparison of the current system with the building on and the revision of under ESSA of a revised system of looking at student outcomes. And so you'll notice in here is that we're shifting the focus from only, in the old system of only focusing on student achievement results for ELA and math, to looking at core academic subjects. And so what you'll notice and what we'll be talking about is that there'll be a measure of student achievement at the 3 through 8 level of our testing program in ELA, math, and science. At the high school level, it will be ELA, math, science, and social studies, in addition to other factors. There's goals specific to graduation rate. But in addition to looking at academic achievement and graduation rate, we're also looking at what the outcomes are within our schools for the development of English language proficiency of those students who are English language learners. We'll be looking at chronic absenteeism, and we'll be looking at college, career, and civic readiness. Those last 2 points are new in terms of the accountability system under ESSA, and I want to go into those with a little bit more detail. In terms of the measures of academic achievement, as we look at academic progress and student growth over time, those have some similarity in terms of the metrics that are used in determining that. And so for tonight, I'm not going to go deeply into any of the metrics. I just want you to have the highlights of the overall focus of the new accountability system. In terms of what happens as a result of that, know for us, this is about the accountability system is a guidepost. This is not for us as a district. This is never about just focus on compliance. This is about knowing where we are with our priorities, and this is an overarching guidepost to give us a sense of where we are in the direction that we're going. Know that the priorities we've already identified in terms of equity of educational opportunity for our students, of broadening and enriching our students, as well as supporting our 21st century learning skills, are already on that pathway in terms of what the state is looking at of outcomes for its students. And so I just like to, whenever we start talking about accountability, everyone gets a little bit heightened. We certainly have over the years had various ways that we've looked at the notion of accountability system and where we fall within that. And this is for me to share with all of us. It's one point of data in many that we'll be using as part of our overall strategic planning process. In terms of the metrics, this graphic I share with you here and for future reference. Know that the components, New York State has moved to moving towards the system of multiple measures. Some of them are required measures under the federal regulation guidelines, and states also have flexibility with measures. But know for us within our system, we'll be getting data that reports out for us as a district and for our schools around how our students' academic achievement in ELA, math, and science, again, elementary and middle school, and then additionally for high school and social studies. So focus on core instruction. We'll also we'll have information about what our students' growth look over time, and so comparative scoring of our students in relation to students with similar scores from prior years. There's also will be a measure of academic progress, and so again, measuring within individual students and subgroups of students how they are progressing in relation to the pursuit of long-term goals of the state and the interim progress measures. And those three together are real. There's a very long and lengthy metrics around it that I will be happy to share if you'd like to see it. More to come when the state releases our scores, but no, it's not any one single measure that's the driver of this in terms of academic achievement. Equally important, not new, graduation rates, but know that graduation rates alone are not a sole measure. And so, again, in this plan, there are baseline measures in terms of 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohort graduation rates that will be compared against the long-term goal. For the 2021 school year, New York State has defined the 4-year graduation outcome by the time we reach the year 2021-22 is at 83%. The 5-year rate is at 85%, and the 6-year rate is 86, almost 87%. And so, again, where we are right now in relation to what those long-term goals are expected to be across the entire state is, again, what we'll use as a guidepost. What is important, I'll jump down to the bottom for a moment. One part of it is how many students of our overall cohorts are graduating within 4-, 5-, or 6-year outcomes. An equally important measure, which is new and one of those flexibility measures for New York State, is what they've defined as college, career, and civic readiness measures. And I'm going to share a chart with you in a few minutes, but we will be looking at a weighted valuing system of what our students' opportunities are for accelerated learning, as well as whether they are our students and their opportunities to achieve advanced diploma and career readiness credentials. So I'll share that with you in one moment. But those two factors are important and will be new in the conversation in terms of the accountability system. Another new accountability measure is around chronic absenteeism, and I'd like to go into that one just with a little bit more detail. But know that for each of our schools, as well as our subgroup of students within those schools, we'll be taking a look and taking a deep look around what's defined as chronic absenteeism and how the state has defined that. That it's students who miss 10% or more of the school year, whether those are excused or unexcused absence, and that really speaks to loss of instructional time. And so that I'll share with you a little bit about that. Our English language proficiency, again, is a separate measure, and we'll be looking at, again, the progressions and the weighted development, as well as the 5-year expectancy of moving all of our students with English that are English as a second language learner to a language proficiency level. So going into chronic absenteeism, just to go a little bit deeper, because this is a new measure and will be new in the public reports. It will be for every for subgroups of students, as well as the student group as a whole within a school. We'll be looking at the number of students in those subgroups who are missing 10% or more of their school days for which they are enrolled in the school. And so again, that it takes into account both excused and unexcused absences. They're not they're not differentiated. That one is while a legal absence, it is still a loss of instructional time and counted towards that 10%. In comparison to the total number of students within the subgroup or within the school as a whole who are enrolled in that. The state defines this as being that a student is considered a student of that school when they're enrolled for a minimum of 10 days, and that they've attended for at least one of those days in that 10-day period. And so then their attendance is a factor that is counted as a part of that school's overall attendance or chronic absenteeism.
Does that include lateness, or it just have to be out all day?
From the information that I've seen, it's looking at the total instructional day, although there is data being collected about tardiness as well. In terms of the additional accountability measure that New York State has defined and opted for is what they call college, career, and civic readiness. The way that's being measured and reported out is looking at the opportunities that our students have and the types of diploma outcomes that they're achieving. So again, remember, one part of this is what our overall graduation rate looks like for our students and the degree of success of which they accomplish those diploma outcomes within an expected 4-year graduation cohort or high school cohort time period, whether they're achieving that in 5 years or they're achieving that in 6 years. Equally important now is what the opportunities are for students, and then also what opportunities look like for our subgroup of students within schools. In terms of, are they graduating with Regents with advanced distinction, meaning they're taking more than the minimum required coursework in either humanities or in the math and science fields? Do they have access to AP coursework or dual enrolled college coursework? If they are taking AP exams, are they scoring at the proficiency level of 3, score of 3 or higher, 3, 4, or 5? For us here in Beacon, we don't have international baccalaureate programming, but that too is considered at the same weight of AP coursework. Are students enrolled in career and technical education programming? And is the completion of their program resulting in their passing of certification or national exams and licensing programs? Do our students graduate with a local diploma with a career and tech education accreditation? For our students with severe disabilities that are working towards the skills and achievement credential, are they scoring at their commencement level with an average score of 4 in the subject areas of ELA, math, and science on those alternate standards? And so those are weighted in the highest measure. For students, again, looking at diploma outcomes where they may be taking or have taken AP coursework or dual enrolled coursework and graduating with a Regents diploma, but perhaps not scoring on that AP exam at a level 3 or higher. That has a slightly lower weighted value. If we have our students who are graduating with a Regents or a local diploma but not with advanced distinction, but they have a CDOS endorsement, that falls within that category. For our students with severe disabilities, completing the skills and achievement credential, is their proficiency score an average score of 3 on the New York State alternate assessment in those subject areas. When our students are graduating with just the bar or the 22 credits, but not with particular advanced coursework or advanced extensions, that's given a weighted value of 1. When our students are graduating with only a CDOS credential or have completed a high school equivalency program, an approved GED program as part there, we have some credit for that, but again, not weighted as much. Yes, Anthony.
So the different weights, I can see that, but how does that trend? I mean, is it out of 100, or is it? I'm not exactly sure how this final score looks like in this category. And I'm specifically interested in this category because we just had the presentation about student success after us. So How does this final score look like? Is it like an SAT score? Is it, I mean, what is it?
Well, it's not for an individual student, it's looking at our cohort of students, and we'll have an overall composite score for the school that will be an average based on this weighted measure of all of the diploma outcomes for that graduating cohort.
Out of 100 or?
No, not out of 100. It'll be an average, it'll be weighted as an average score. I can share some examples, like.
So Anthony, they take all the schools in New York State,
Mhm.
right? And there's 700 districts, 700 plus.
Yeah.
And they'll see what, they'll give each one of these a weight for everyone graduating, and they'll come up with that bell curve and determine it that way probably.
Will we fall in the bell curve?
It doesn't say yet because it's a new accountability measure, so they're saying these are the weights that they're giving for what students earned. But yet, that's going to go like every year. The Regents changes based on what's a passing rate. A student could get a 35 on an algebra Regents, but yet that goes to a 65 depending on how it falls in the state piece.
And if we score higher, does that mean more funding, or does that mean no
It
funding?
means that
No.
we're not going to be on that accountability list. So it's a new accountability measure to say if we're not meeting the standards that the state set forth, or we're that bottom 10%. Then it would be like, oh, we're a school in need. But if we're in that upper 90, that from the 90, upper 90, right? We're not lower, upper 90, then we're not on that watch list or something. And depending on how many years you go with that, it's almost like the lab plan, right? Or the
Yeah.
sequence piece, that it's similar to that.
Okay. And then since CTE is two times the weight, I mean, we have one CTE teacher in high school right now, and it's my understanding that the CTE program only needs was, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not really knowledgeable in the CTE program, but we could have at least one CTE program where the CTE teaches the 3 classes and there's 2 advanced classes, and that's enough to fulfill the one CTE program?
Our students that are graduating with local diplomas with CTE credentials are our students that are attending BOCES programs and completing a vocational training over a 2-year period. That's what the local diploma with CTE endorsement refers to. Those are predominant for us. Our students access those through the BOCES program.
But could we have at least one CTE program in-house with that one CTE teacher?
It's not something that exists right now. I know it is something that's of importance, that you've brought up before in terms of what our future planning might be for developing CTE programming, but it's not something that's as simple as identify a teacher and that fulfills that piece. But I will tell you that none of our students are denied opportunity right now with the slots that we do have available for those that want to pursue vocational training at BOCES.
I'd beg to differ if you have to choose between going up to BOCES at Salt Point Turnpike and taking the classes here. But I would like to follow. You're right. I brought it up before. I'd like some follow up on what a CT program in house may or may not look like.
Sure.
Because I'm really big on the
Right.
requirements of it, and I'd like more information on it. Because maybe I shouldn't be bringing it up so much because I'm misinformed. I don't know.
So certainly I can share with you some information about that, and it's certainly a topic that we'll keep talking about, I know, as we talk about our future plans in the district.
I'm interested in it as well.
So I have a couple questions
Yes,
with
go ahead.
the new ESSA that New York State has submitted.
Yep.
So you're talking about additional accountabilities. That means that we still are held to the accountabilities that were in place with the 95%
Yes.
having to take the tests and then the results of the New York State tests.
Yes.
So they're still in place.
Those are still in place, yeah. And I'm sorry I didn't highlight those for us for tonight because I wanted to just be able to draw your attention to the things that are brand new.
Yep.
But yes, our academic measures, again, what's being expanded, so beyond just ELA and math, will also include science and then at the high school level, social studies as well. Participation rate of 95% was a non-negotiable for the federal government with state plans. And so that is still a measurable factor. And there are, just to give the broad strokes, certain like internal auditing that we do, for example, if we're not meeting that 95%, and that's the only factor in the accountability of which we're not meeting the state expected results.
With the additional accountability that the state has set forth in ESSA, have they given us additional funds to help meet those accountability measures.
Is that a rhetorical question,
I just
Mr.
wanted
White?
to make sure that people understand that
Yeah.
with the new accountability, did we get
Yes.
additional funding to help meet those new accountability measures?
It's called an unfunded mandate.
Generally, no.
Right.
I will say this. Dr. Landell mentioned, the Title 4A grant that we were awarded was a competitive grant. That is money that falls under ESSA that we were successful in achieving. Which speaks to the expansion of our elementary band program. The focus of the grant was to write proposals that would provide well-rounded educational opportunities and access to accelerated learning opportunities for our students. In addition to that, it will be money that will fund us over this year to be able to expand our foreign language program. So that is ESSA-related money that wasn't previously available that we were able to competitively compete and gain the award for. All states across the district on a smaller scale and in our title funding received some additional ESSA Title 4A money. But again, it's small in scope and it's part of our consolidated or title funding. So it's not necessarily new money, it's just that additional. But for us, we were able to secure $400,000. In addition to that, we just recently, although it's not, the ink hasn't dried on a letter we're waiting from the comptroller's office, but we have also secured competitive funding award under Title 2B, which Title 2 funds professional development learning opportunities for teachers and leaders. For us, it's a math science partnership grant. Our higher education partner is Clarkson University with the Beacon Institute for Rivers and Estuaries. And so we have official notification from State Ed that we are the recipient of $118,000 to fund the expansion of in integrated science math learning opportunities for our teachers at the middle and high school level. So that's kind of fresh off the press. But that is an example, again, of some ways that they're putting some new opportunities for monies under ESSA or title. But we don't get a boatload of money because there's many more additional accountability factors to pay attention to.
How fresh off the press was the 118? Like, is that when did we find out about that?
Last week, on Friday.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Can you just explain what the measures of interim progress are, the MIPS that they?
Yes. So the measures of interim progress, the state has defined long-range goals. They take where a district or where a school or a particular subgroup of students in a school are in relation to achieving that 100% proficiency, if we're talking about academic achievement. And so the difference between that long-term measure of 100% of our students are proficient at proficiency levels versus where they currently are, the current state, is the gap. And so then the measure of interim progress takes how far that or how large that gap is, and then distributes that across the duration of the plan, a 5-year period, and its incremental increases over time. So the measures of interim progress then are the short-term steps that a district or a school or for a particular subgroup of students would be expected to meet from year to year. And so one part of it is measuring how far we are from the long-range expected goal of 100% to where are we meeting those measured interim progress steps, or the MIP.
So I think this is more of a comment than a question, but with this new accountability of ESSA and especially with the academic progress that they're mentioning, and so many students are opting out of the state assessments, does the district have any benchmarking or progress monitoring of students so they could identify how the students are growing? Or is there a plan to come up with benchmarking programs to see if the students are taking it in October, then January, and then in the spring, to see, because there's a lot of benchmarking programs that are aligned to this to to the standards that the students still have to, we want them to get and attain, but yet we may not be measuring that because they're not taking the state test to see if they are attaining those standards and getting those skills. So I believe we currently do not have a benchmarking program in the district for like ELA and math.
We don't.
Is there a plan as to come up or investigate which type of benchmarking system would be so we can kind of get that data to see how the students are progressing towards it because they're not taking the state assessments?
So I look towards Mr. Wright because it's something that's a topic of conversation between he and I over the, and others and other leaders in the district. It's not a solution that we have that's at the ready right now. It is something that is part of the longer range, this year into next year, and hopefully in place within a 3-year period of less of what then is the appropriate measure of how either we're using common assessments or a standardized product to give us some benchmarking results. Am I off base, Mr. Wright? No. Okay. Any other things you think I should add with that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. I mean, the notion of creating a benchmarking system is enormous, where we have nothing that we're building, that we basically have to build it from the ground up or invest a huge amount of money to bring in that product. And so it's not been something that was put into place several years ago, but is certainly something that we see as a gap.
May I bounce off of that? That's a very good question Mr. White has asked. This is the whole area of alternative measures, accountability and benchmarking is things other than the state tests, right? That's what we're talking about. I think there's a lot of room for development there. You're right, it might be expensive and time consuming, but the opt-out movement is not going away, and there even are predictions that you might have to spend some of your Title I money trying to browbeat people into not opting out, taking the tests, and then taking that money away from programs that actually benefit the students that you're allegedly trying to help. I think there's an awful lot of craziness built into this whole system. It's a little better than No Child Left Behind, but I can't say that I like it. I see mostly improvements, but it's kind of like out of the fire into the frying pan.
Right.
So I had a question specifically about that point about the 10%. And your chart, which I think is very helpful, talked about the old system had required a minimum of 10%. This is grading on a curve where 10% of the schools have to flunk into the focus category. And that's been replaced by something about looking at low-performing subgroups, as I recall. Could you explain, is that 10% thing still there somehow, or is it really gone?
Well, the lowest 5%, the lowest performing 5% of schools in all of New York State are those that will be designated, as my understanding, as comprehensive schools for improvement. In addition to that, targeted improvement schools, which so these two terms, remember, in the old system, we had our priority schools. Those were the ones that you're referring to, Mr. Wolf, in terms of the lowest 10%. Priority schools were the lowest performing schools and districts in the state. So again, they're looking at the lowest 5% of schools now, and those will be given a designation of comprehensive. And so here, actually, these are the 4 different identification categories. So comprehensive support and improvement. And so again, the lowest performing schools, lowest performing subgroups with no sustained improvement over time. So multiple years of not making those measured interim progress points. Targeted support and improvement schools. Those would be relatively equivalent to in the former accountability system of our focused schools and districts, of which several years ago we shared that designation, and so those are a school that has a low performing subgroup of students in comparison to statewide benchmarks and interim measures. There's a system of identifying recognition schools. Previously in the other system, they were known as reward schools. Those are schools that are accelerating and exceeding the threshold limits of the state's long-term measures. And any schools that are neither share low-performing subgroup of students or the overall performance rate within the school, and they're not rapidly accelerating schools, will have a designation of good standing. And so that's the system in terms of what we should be anticipating when the Commissioner's Office releases publicly the data for all the schools in New York State. In what I understand will be in October, is when they'll make that official announcement. Much more that I could share and go into. I really just wanted to kind of speak to the highlights. Certainly information that you're looking to gain about either the plan, the metrics, or just kind of the what does it all mean. I'm happy to get that information from you, and we'll certainly be more than happy to share and help to demystify the new accountability system as I'm learning and demystifying it for myself. Just know this, on our district website, I included in here the link. There's several documents in there. There's certainly links to the New York State Ed website and specifically to the New York State plan. The State Education Department put out several information for what board members need to know about the Every Student Succeeds Act, information of what educators need to know, information of what parents need to know. Those are all the links for those documents have been on our website. That's how you can reach that. The New York State Department website, that particular link is the link to the New York State plan itself with all the details about how the plan was developed, what metrics they were focused on, what goals they were setting, and pretty much everything you need to know about what's in the approved plan from the state. And then certainly my contact information for anyone can certainly email me with questions, and I'd be happy to connect you with the resources or find the information out for you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee reports, including board comments. Who would like to go first? No, or any?
So we don't have much yet, but I just want to let everyone know that the school year started off well. We are going to be talking with the student body by grade this year, unlike last year, and getting feedback from them. A lot of people like the new gym system, physical education that GM has put in. That has gotten a lot of good feedback so far from the students. And we just got an email today from one of the guidance counselors at Beacon with all of the extracurriculars that Beacon has, which is good because I know a lot of kids don't know about all of the clubs we have here. But we're also trying to work on getting students to look at their emails more often because we really have that disconnect in Beacon. They don't look at their school email as much as they should. So we're working on that, and then we'll get some more feedback on how the students want to go from here in the next meeting.
Welcome back. Hello to some new faces. So yeah, basically what Noah said, we're planning on meeting by grade with high schoolers and kind of just gathering information, kind of like we did last year, but we're going to try, I think, to be more visible, because I think the survey was a little too distant. But yeah, we'll try to gather more information since it's in here last year, and hopefully implement something very nice before we leave.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
I'll start with my personal comments. I wanted to congratulate and thank everyone from the learning community, including, of course, our administrators, our principals, our teachers. It's so exciting to see this time. I feel like it's a mix of excitement and maybe a little bit of dread for everyone involved as the summer ends and the whole system comes to life. We're watching all of our PTOs and PTSOs send out announcements, sign-up sheets, of course our students for doing what they do, and our parents. It's an exciting time. I heard a lot of parents reached out informally, talking about concerns about the heat those first few days, and I shared that as well. My kids came home soaked in sweat, and I was so worried about it. I ended up researching all of our budgets and our capital improvements and our HVAC systems, and by the time I really got halfway through that, the weather had changed, and I was looking for a box of sweaters. So it's a great reminder that things feel so urgent, but in the end, they work out, and I know that we have a whole year to put some more thought into that. I wanted to thank Dennis for his comments. His reminder that I think we all share the idea of thinking about maintaining safety in our schools and maintaining focus on our students' needs. More than that, I think it's amazing that so many people show up and reach out to us and take that opportunity to do that. I know a lot of people can't always come here in person, but I know a lot of people watch at home and are going to watch this online, and they can write us emails. You can always reach the board at the BCSD, BOE at beaconk12.org. And I can say the board, from my experience so far, has some conversation about literally every email we get. No matter how small or personal, it affects our conversation. So just please write us. I think that's it for my personal comments. Moving on to the policy committee meeting, we have, I just want to announce our next meeting is going to be on September 26th at 8:15 at the district office, and that is open to the public. That's all I have to say.
Any policies reviewing?
Oh yeah, the primary policy we'll be looking at is I don't have the number in front of me, but it's the homeschool and extracurricular activities policy we'll be talking about primarily.
Okay, thank you. Craig?
I'd like to commend the administration for jumping on the mold question very quickly, and the public communications that were issued promptly when things were discovered and dealt with. This can be serious. It doesn't sound like these are the worst of the lot, such as I've heard of. They seem to be relatively mild-mannered problems, but it will cost us some money to do cleanups and make sure we're in good shape. So congratulations on the response so far. It does raise some questions. I think we'll probably be discussing it in our committees. Looking forward to maybe talking to some of the experts and people who know what the causes are and where we might go with that. I must say I was a little surprised that it happened at all until I remembered that we live in the Hudson Valley, where we're the home of high humidity and heat. And funny things are starting to happen in nature and inside buildings too, something to watch out for. Public Relations Advocacy Legislative Committee, we're set our meeting for September 26th at 7 p.m. at the district office, starting to ask the members to build an agenda so we can get off on the right foot. That's it.
Great, thank you. Laura?
Yeah, so we are setting up the first wellness committee meeting for September 26th. I believe it's going to be after school at 4 o'clock. So there will also be childcare available, and we encourage people to attend. I attended last year before I was on the board, and it was a really good introduction to a lot of the ways that the school policies operate. So I found it really useful. The Diversity Committee, we're working on our first meeting date, and I'm sure Anthony can talk more about that. But that's all I have for now.
Great, thank you.
Me?
Yep.
First, just to address our student board members, who I haven't actually met yet, but hi.
Hi.
I was happy to hear you say that you're making efforts to get kids to check their email. So I thought I'd just plant the little seed of an idea, since I know the high school does not have a school newspaper. I thought maybe you guys might consider a e-school newsletter or a school newspaper that might be delivered via email. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Thank you.
And then I was surprised in the first few days of school to find out that some parents either didn't know or were less than informed about the new 4-day cycle in our elementary schools. So I wondered, A, how was that communicated to parents when it was first passed? And B, have you had any feedback since school started from parents with questions or, feedback, good or bad, about the new 4-day cycle? Because I know that those of us who were informed are super excited about it. So I just wondered what the feedback was to you.
I haven't really received much feedback directly about it. My son likes it, so there's that. In terms of how it's communicated, I think I try to speak about it a lot. I'm not really certain how much principals did. I think if you're a parent who pays attention to your kid's schedule, we try to pay some sort of attention at our house, and so you notice that there's more PE. You notice that, like today, my son had art and library because library exists outside of the 4-day rotation. So, I think people are probably going to start picking up on it that way, and I'll let the board know feedback that I get on it. But I'm thinking it's going well so far.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that, or just comment? The primary point of confusion that I think that I've heard people mention, which I didn't quite have an answer for, was this of when. I think people have noticed that library is out of the rotation. So the question is, when does library happen? This idea is, I know it's at the discretion of the teacher. Is that?
There's part that is and part that isn't. Every class has a time to go to the library every week that's on the same day. So it's not any sort of rotation. It's like Monday at 1 o'clock or Thursday at 9 o'clock. And so that's outside the rotation. So every class has that, and then there's a lot of time for small groups of kids or whole class, to do projects in the library. We've been doing a lot of PD with our library media folks this summer and last year. We've been buying different sorts of technology to implement in the libraries too. So I think that library schedule was developed a little bit later in the summer. But yeah.
I have one other brief question. I just wondered, how's it going with our new director of security? Just really briefly, are things going well? Anything exciting to report?
I think today was a great example. We have an election, a primary election on Thursday. So two of our schools are polling sites: Roundabout Middle and Forestville Elementary. And so, not that we're necessarily, scared about anything. We're going to have people coming into the building that don't have anything to do with our schools, and so we had to come up with a safety plan for those days. In the past, it would have been Anne Marie and I sort of, running around with the principals trying to figure it out and trying to pull in extra people. And Mark has been working on this last week. Today he talked with us about what he needed. We're going to be bringing in some extra security personnel for those days just to work the polling site, just to make sure people who vote don't, go into the school. Again, we're not worried about it, but it's just an extra safety measure. And so he's got it all mapped out. And we're going to have, not just during the school day, but we're going to have security folks there from 6 to 9. I mean, they're not involved in the voting, obviously. They're just going to sort of stand to the side, just to make sure people stay where they need to go. So that, it's a little example, but it's just like he's just being really proactive about that kind of stuff.
No, it's a level of coordination that I'm sure is really helpful. So
Yeah,
great.
no, it's and there's dozens of examples throughout a year that happen like that. So
He's going to be presenting the audit.
our plan is to do an update on the safety or the Alteris audit next board meeting on the 24th. So
Great.
Mark will be part of that presentation.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's all.
Mike?
Okay, well, first, I was really happy to listen to Jonathan tonight and talking about the strategic coherence is really, we've been talking about that, setting out the goals so then we can align our resources in order to achieving those goals. So that's really a great start. I'm not sure what we actually need to do in order to say, yes, go do it.
It's a BOCES COSER, so
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
Yep.
It's funny when you listen to the Every Student Succeeds Act. I mean, it's like the state is saying, we know what success is, and we're going to force you to do things to produce students, to have that success. And so now we're going to kind of be able to take a look at it on the other end and say, okay, we're going to leverage that because we have to do it. Plus, we're going to make sure it aligns with all our goals. So it actually, with the accountability model and all that, they'll always be playing. We don't want them to play off each other. They have to be aligned with each other. But I think there are going to be some bounds that some rules that we're going to stay within to meet the ESSA requirements, right? And be able to yet make the plan our own.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that comes together.
Yeah.
Happy that you had good communications about the mold issues and took care of them right away. For the facilities and operations committee meeting is tomorrow night.
We can get into
at 7
detail.
p.m. So I wanted to have some detail questions about if we have, if we need any building procedures and things when we're away for a long time to monitor and start them up and evaluate properly before we enter a school year.
Yeah, we'll be prepared to.
So I was talking about that. And finally, when do we have them already, the buses come?
The new buses?
The new buses.
They are here.
They are here. Do they have the Bulldogs on them?
I don't know the answer to that. I can find out.
Find out.
Another thing,
I have not gotten it.
just
Well,
if
we're
you
gonna
bring
talk
up
about that.
facilities, we wanted to do building tours before the next 3 board meetings.
Yes.
We've had success doing that before board meetings in the past because it's generally time that you kind of have blocked.
Right.
So we'll send out a schedule, sort of we'll do these 2 or 3, and we'll hit every single building, including transportation, over the next 3 board meetings.
Good. Excellent. Ken, was there any, we could talk about tomorrow, any issues with this lightning strike in the building?
There was some equipment that needs to be replaced. There's an insurance claim on it, so it has to do with the fuel monitoring.
Right.
The other issues, the communication issues were fixed. We had Verizon come in and do that. But we are submitting it to insurance, and we're in the process of trying to get the equipment up and running.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anthony?
Good evening. I'd like to welcome back our student liaisons. We missed you. In fact, we actually talked about, this is probably a refresher for the board, but we talked about student clubs and how maybe perhaps a student club fair would be useful so the students can see what's on the menu and encourage students to make suggestions as well the clubs are available. Also, I wrote a letter to the editor for the Beacon Free Press, welcome everyone back. I scooped some ice cream the day the teachers had their professional development. And a bunch of other board members were there with us, scooping ice cream, so that was actually good for the soul. The staff directory online, I think, needs to be updated. There's a few titles that are last year's titles, I guess. I was looking some people up. And diversity committee, the 3 out of the 4 board members can make it on the 18th at 8:15 p.m. I don't know, Anthony, if you can make it, but I'm gonna, because it's 7 days away, I'm gonna pin that if that's okay with you.
At what time?
8:15 p.m. Okay, thanks. I also still need contact information for the new officers of the PTO, PTA, PTSOs in different schools. This came out of the last meeting of the diversity committee to talk to them about bringing a useful topic of a speaker or something that would benefit their school. So I still want to call out to the PTO, PTA, PTSOs, and I don't know if there's a way that the district maintains a list or something that I can get a hold of on that. Is there, do you have?
They all have like Facebook pages or.
Yeah, I tried to track all that, and so some of them only have Facebook pages, some have websites, some of them have actually a general email box. It varies between the different organizations.
It was something that my assistant used to do. I'm sort of transitioning right now, so we don't have it together, but we'll have somebody do it.
All right, thanks. So, you know, in speaking about preparing students for the future, you know, I don't know if I brought up this example in the past, but the Mahopac High School in Putnam, you know, they offer an elective, which is an EMT course, so that you get credit for the course and you get a certification as an EMT. So I kind of want to bring that example up as something, you know, we can think about. And then lastly, I've been working with Glenn McBride from the who was a recruiter for the Explorer Posts for the Boy Scouts of America. And the Boy Scouts, you know, they don't just take boys anymore. So he's trying to get community stakeholders together. And Matt, you may have been contacted by him because you're on his list.
I have a meeting with them later this week, I think.
Yeah. So. You know, this is and the Beacon Volunteer Ambulance Corps is actually buying into that program as well. So that's all I have.